In our discussion coming up, we just want to reflect upon whether or not changes to the mode of life, the mode of subsistence, and basically the way society comes together to create the necessities of life, the mode, means, and relations of production, to be scientific, and the way civilization is ordered in terms of modernity, technology, subsistence, if that has an impact on our ability to be resilient in the face of natural disasters, whether we're talking about climate change or otherwise. We also make our position clear in subsequent segments. We do not believe natural disasters were man-made problems. For example, wars, um, conflicts, whether we're talking about Russia, Ukraine, or if we mismanage our environment. We don't believe basically incidences, whether correlated with human being factors or strictly natural events, which are often compounded by a human factor. We do not believe it has anything to do with any type of religion, basically prophecies, or we do not believe any of these events have anything to do with, for example, Bible prophecies. But we have to respect people of every faith, and people are entitled to their beliefs. So the right to believe is fundamental. But then there are just some random stuff, like, to a certain extent, cultural stuff, that's always going to be foreign to us, and we don't want to. We're not going to, dive into different debates. For example, there's Marjorie Taylor Greene, some odd item. Apparently, we don't know how to interpret it, but basically, there's something about a concert where she's posted something about there's a Satanic Church, or something about some type of performance. Yeah, those things are just kind of like, uh, we don't even know what we're reading, but these cultural things are kind of like, they're kind of, you know, every nation has their own like cultural perspective, right? Um, Internally, there's like different persuasions, but these things for example, we'll weigh in on military science. We're better at the blunt, objective stuff. Uh, for example, what are the capabilities of a Type 55, uh, missile cruiser as it relates to an Arleigh Burke class U.S. Naval surface combatant? Something that's objective. The cultural stuff is all foreign and alien to us, but we're better at the military hardware, the kind of stuff. So let's get on to the discussion. We are aware that thus far there has been deadly earthquakes which struck Turkey, causing horrific loss of life and damage to property, a humanitarian tragedy. It's a very sad and unfortunate situation. Terrible. Absolutely a disaster. You look at natural disasters, everything from, for example, hurricanes, tornadoes, earthquakes, tsunamis. Um, we just wonder, does that have anything to do with um, the way modern civilization is developing? For example, if you look at the traditional Mongolian grasslands, other places, for example, in ancient North American history, how did the Native American nations manage natural events? For example, if there's a nation in a central area, assuming that they're in an area with low or no risk of tsunamis. Like, for example, if they're situated well away from the ocean, would an earthquake in those days, would it just be felt as a tremor, pass by with no casualties, no loss of life, minimal damage to property? Basically, were the ancient were the traditional ways of life more resilient in the face of disasters and calamities? For example, in our picture here, it's a traditional type of structure. Um, we might get the pronunciation wrong. The Mongolian, the yurts, homes, traditional style homes. They're beautiful. Um, they're beautiful dwellings. Would such structures, would a more traditional mode of life be more resilient in the face of natural disasters? So our understanding is that a lot of the human toll, for example, in an earthquake, if we assuming that there's no, assuming in the absence of tsunamis and other, you know, compound events or something like that, in the event of a standalone earthquake in a region of the world where that follows more of a traditional mode of life, would there not be more resiliency? Is it quite possible, for example, in a grassland as this, if there were an earthquake, would it be more resilient? Would there be less loss of life? And is there any way to basically update standards? Is there any way to construct modern structures that would be able to take on a degree of resiliency? We're not saying everyone needs to go back to a traditional mode of life, but so risk management, identify the risk, determine if there's a risk mitigation strategy, determine if a risk should simply be accepted or mitigated against. If generally in risk management, if the mitigation doesn't, if the cost of mitigation outweighs the cost of the benefit, where the risk should simply be accepted, then basically a society doesn't go overboard. So, for example, you could theoretically mitigate the risk of, say, certain types of natural disasters if you want to go extreme, but for example, mitigating the risk of an earthquake by simply adopting a traditional mode of life might not be a good risk mitigation plan implementation, because the benefits of modernity, of a modern of technology, all these modern mode of life, the modern mode of life with all its negatives and positives, the benefits might outweigh the cost of mitigation, where some risks are just accepted. For example, there are areas where tornadoes are more frequent, but it doesn't mean a society is just going to go overboard just to prevent the risk of loss of life or property in the event of a natural disaster. But with that being said, a lot of times after events like this, everything from the alleged Chinese spy balloon, there could basically Russia, Ukraine, everybody's entitled to their beliefs. There's talks about different prophecies, how it aligns with faith and belief. We don't believe anything like this earthquake, future earthquakes, past earthquakes. There was a terrible earthquake that hit Lisbon. That was a long time ago. But we don't believe it. We don't believe any these natural calamities, which may or may not be compounded by the modern way of life, the human factor. We don't believe it has anything to do with God, religion, Bible prophecy. We do not believe in anything prophetic. But people are entitled to believe. So we're not trying to say preempt people from saying that this event is connected with a specific Bible prophecy. If you believe that, that's your right. It's your right to basically espouse your beliefs. That's freedom and liberty. We don't believe that, but other people are at liberty to believe that. But from our understanding, there are natural events, and we don't believe they're connected with anything like to do with religion. It's a terrible tragedy, and hopefully there will be like an international effort, um, friendship, basically efforts just to help Turkey recover the people who are actually um, directly affected and impacted.